Hi everybody, happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I am doing something a little out of character, but I am trying to embrace the moment, and as pieces of information or like inspiration come to me, I'm just trying to do it and let what be what it is. So here we are. So I started to write a post in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and it started to get really long, and I am trying not to have you guys read tons and tons of stuff, but I do want to kind of get some messages out, and things that I feel really passionately about, and I want to make sure that I'm living my mission every day. And so in addition to writing the book, I have been kind of inspired to write some things that I think are worth sharing, and I would like to share them with you now. So give a little shout out to my friend Jennifer, who gave me this hat as a going away present. I love it very much. And then my cousin Nate and Becca, Island Hop and Brewery. So that's the attire I'm wearing today. So shout out to them. It's been suggested a couple times that I start some sort of podcast about behavioral science and things like that. So this is my first little test at that. So if you are liking what I'm doing and you're interested in seeing more, let me know. Leave me a comment, say like, Abby, yes, do more podcasts. That would be amazing. Give me a little reinforcement for this. If it's something that you really like, if it's something that you don't like, think I should stay away from, please, you can let me know that as well. Maybe message that if you don't like it as much. That's okay. I like feedback. But I do want to share a story with you guys today that I think has a really important message, and something that I think is something that we should all think about today, being that it is MLK Day. I have everything printed out, so I'm going to be reading a little bit, so I apologize. I would love to be able to memorize this whole script and say it out like I can just belt it out. Some parts I will, I can not read, but I put a lot of thought and effort into everything that I wanted to say, and so there are some parts that I might read verbatim to make sure that I say exactly what I mean to say. So I was looking at some quotes from Martin Luther King Jr., and one of them that kind of struck me and made me think, okay, these are the things that I'm thinking about right now. These are the things that are inspiring my actions, and I am motivated to do what it is that I'm doing right now. I'm motivated to write this book and to do this project because of this. So when I saw this quote, it was like, yes, okay, that really kind of captures something for me, but on a very non-behavior analytic words. We have to kind of think outside the box a little bit sometimes when we get trained to think technically. But the quote is from his book, Strength of Love, and it says, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that." These are the themes that I'm thinking about when in relation to the book that I'm writing, because ultimately, if we're not able to connect our actions to our values, and like values like loving, caring, and compassion, and then connect our values to kind of what we're kind of working towards, what our greater purpose is for this world, then we might be missing the point, right? So if we're not acting out of a place of like that's grounded in values, then we could be kind of acting in a way that could be negatively impacting the outcomes of this world. So we're kind of left wondering and asking ourselves, as humans and as a society, what are we doing here? Where are we going? What is the end goal for our society, for our world, for humanity? So what's the destination? What's the ultimate goal? And really then, like, how are we going to get there? But I feel like these questions are largely unanswered, or we haven't come to a consensus about who we are as a people and what we truly value, and we haven't really determined what we're going to do to make it better. So we keep doing the same things over and over, and we keep making the same mistakes over and over, and we're all still suffering, you know? Like life's good for some of us, but life's not that great for most of us. It's just kind of, oh, it's kind of okay, but it's not great. And I feel like there's something that we can do. Like we can do better, but we have to make a choice to do better. We have to take action. We have to stand up. We have to do something. We have to be better. We have to be better people. If we want the world to be better, we have to stop blaming people and blaming other things for our problems, because the reality is that you do have lots of control and lots of power. But if you don't know how to use those tools and you don't have to know how to do those things, then you're going to be really ineffective at this life thing. And that's dumb. Like, if you don't have a skill and you need to learn it in order to live a better life, like everybody should be afforded that, right? Like, oh, you have difficulty managing your money, so how about you take the like life skill class, right? You need to learn how to budget, and that's a skill that can be learned and it can be taught, but people just continue to have problems, and like they're incapable of doing something different. They're incapable of acting differently to change the outcome. They're just kind of like, I'm just a victim to my circumstances. Well, it's crap. It's not true. And that's why, I get so frustrated. And it was why I'm so passionate about this, because I see this problem. It's like over and over and over and over, the same problems are happening. And so I want to do something different. And I want to have a positive change on this planet. And I want to use what I know as a behavioral scientist and what I feel as a humanitarian. So that, what makes me a humanistic behavioral scientist. What I know in my head and what I know in my heart, which I know is just connected to neurochemicals that are in my body that are making me feel good. I know that this is the right thing to do, and I think that it's really important for people in this world to hear what we have to say as behavioral scientists and how we see the world. And to me, what it really comes down to is empowerment, and change and skills, and giving people the skills that they need to succeed. And if they don't have those things, help them get it. Like, it's possible. Everybody's capable of doing everything, right? Like, my favorite story of my, like a huge aha moment for me in the world of working with individuals with disabilities, was in my family studies class with and with Beth. She's amazing, amazing person. Elizabeth West, she's wonderful. But she brought in a guest speaker, who was severely impacted with cerebral palsy. And it was just a classic case. We've seen, this is what I was trained for. I was trained to work with individuals with really, really significant disabilities, which impact their ability to communicate and to move and to process information in the world. So this woman, who Chris, was severely impacted with cerebral palsy, and from the outside, right, kind of the typically, like the words that start to come to mind when you see somebody in her condition, not because I feel these things, but it's just the words, like it's, oh, she can't think, she can't talk, she can't do this, she can't do that, like labeling all of her inabilities. And it's like, you have to kind of stop and push back, but that's your brain, that's how your brain processes information. It's like it sees something and it's trying to categorize it. Like, what is this? What am I seeing? How I need to understand how to interact with this change in my environment. That's what our brains do on a very basic level. And so, like, everybody's brains in the class started thinking these things. Like, we don't know this person. We don't know who she is. We don't know what she's capable of. And it turns out that she is highly capable. She has a communication system. She has been taught from a young age a communication system using her eye blink as Morse code, and she has an interpreter that's with her interpreting her Morse code eye blink to communicate, like a sign language interpreter would, but with eye blinks. It was amazing. I had never in my whole entire life had I seen something so, like, it changed me as a person, because I was like, whoa, this person that anybody, like most people, would look at and think automatically, nope, she's not capable of anything. That's like the automatic thought, because you look at her body and you see her face, and and it, not to, like, people just think those things because that's what they've been taught to think. But then when you see evidence to the contrary, like, oh, I thought, I see a person severely impacted with cerebral palsy in a wheelchair, unable to, has no voluntary, very little voluntary control over any movement of their body. They can't speak, right? They can't move their head, right? They're just, like, their eyes can move, and it's, it can be very, like, it looks horrible, like, it looks sad, because, like, but that person has a brain inside their head that is fully capable of working. And it does. It's a brain, and it comprehends, it learns language, because that's what brains do. It's capable of comprehending and also doing things, right? She, like, clearly she was able to understand everything that was happening around her, and she was able to communicate very eloquently. This woman had her PhD and did parent training with parents of other children who were impacted with cerebral palsy. She was brilliant. But if somebody hadn't had the thought, like, maybe just because, like, she doesn't have voluntary control over her body, that doesn't necessarily mean that her brain isn't capable of learning, right? And if they, like, there's those two choices, there's those two paths. At one point, she could have gone down the, like, oh, she's going into an institution, she's not capable of learning, right? Or what what the opportunity that she had, she was part of a study that taught her a communication method that actually, like, helped tap into this beautiful brain, right? Like, she couldn't say the words, but damn it, she could read, she could talk, she could spell, right? With her eyes. And she communicated. And I'm sure now with technology, there's so much cool technology out there with eye gaze, communication devices. I am sure that, there's, she's even living a more, like, amazing life in terms of being able to communicate. These are the advances that our society has made using behavioral science. We have taught, like she was taught how to communicate with behavioral science. She was taught those things specifically, systematic application of the science to a very severe case of communication deficit. And she learned how to communicate. It was hard, I'm sure. I can't even imagine how difficult it was. But she learned and she did it and she's amazing. And that moment in my graduate career was life-changing for me. Just absolutely 100% life-changing. So I'm kind of rambling on, but this is kind of where I'm at, and I hope you guys are enjoying. So I'm going to kind of go back to what I wrote, because I do think it's a very important story still. Okay, so there are a lot of sad and angry people who are in this world who are suffering, and they engage in a lot of behaviors that end up hurting other people, whether it is on purpose or unintentionally. They're doing something that is causing somebody else to feel pain. And no matter whether it was on purpose or not, it still hurts. And it's in those moments I feel like we as humans are called to do something, whether we're the ones who are feeling the pain or we're seeing kind of somebody else feeling pain. It's up to us to make sure that that person knows that it's not okay. It's not acceptable to do things that put other people at risk, and put other people at risk of harm. But the reality is that it's hard to say something. It's hard to know what to say, like the timing of it. Should I say something now? If I say something now, is it going to make it worse? But what we typically do is we don't do anything, and then suffering continues. That person, like the person who is suffering and causing harm to others, that person is suffering, and then they continue hurting other people, and so those people continue suffering. And so it's just this cycle that keeps going and going and going. But behavioral science is able to explain why this is happening and what's happening here. So when this person is having a bad day, or rather they've probably had like a series of, negative events in their life, chronically or recently, that is kind of affecting how they're perceiving the world, and it's making it more likely that the responses are going to be reflexive. And so that means that they're not necessarily thinking about what they're doing, they're just acting. When something happens, and it's just like, they're kind of lash out without really thinking about it. They're not really stopping to analyze the risks of their behavior, right? Or if they are, they're identifying the potential social or physical risks to themselves or others to be inconsequential. So they continue to engage in more and more risky behavior. I'm losing light. It's getting darker outside. Okay, so once that person engages in that behavior, then it's kind of what happens next in that person's environment that's going to determine what the future likelihood is of them engaging in that behavior again. So if a person engages in a behavior, and there's a good outcome, so there's a positive outcome, it feels good, then the likelihood is that person's going to do that thing again. But if there's an aversive consequence, so what happens, they engage in a behavior, they do something, and then they don't feel good afterwards, then it's less likely they're going to engage in that behavior again. So, I mean, this seems very simplistic, but the truth is, like the very simple truth about behavioral science is that on a very basic level, all of our behaviors, everything that we do, say, and think has been shaped by their history of consequences. So we are a product of our environment, of our history. And at the very basic level, it's, if you get something good, if what you do gets you something good, keep doing it. If what you do gets you something bad, stop doing it, right? At the very basic level. It's, there are so many more complex nuances, but at the very basic level, that's really it. So I want to tell you a story about my husband. So my husband, Dustin, is not a behavioral scientist, but he is one of those people who just seems to intuitively get it. He understands behavior. He understands humans and how they interact. And he's like all of us were. All of us who studied behavioral scientists, most of us were doing it before we knew what we were doing, right? I was started as a paraeducator, and I was just like intuitively, I was just doing what felt right, working with this kid. And then I got a little bit of training from somebody who was running ABA, applied behavior analysis based programs for kids with autism, and he taught me some of the words, and I was like, oh, that's what I was doing, but I just didn't know the words to describe it. So he's just kind of acting on intuition. So he's this kind of person. And so, which makes us an amazing team. So here's the story. We're in Chicago at ABBA in 2016. Our whole trip getting there to the conference was like a series of unfortunate events. But he goes to me on these to these conferences because we make it a small mini vacation, and he's really into what it is that I do. So, during the day, like I'll be at conference talks and he's hanging out and, touring the city. And then in the evenings, we either like hang out together alone and kind of tour the city, or, we hang out with other behavioral scientists and their spouses and drink and talk about, changing the world. So, 2016 was when I started to have this like yearning, like, okay, you've got to do something different. You've got to change. You're not doing what you're meant to be doing. Like this, this is good what you're doing. You're not doing, what you're doing is good work, but it's not you. It's not what you're meant to be doing. So I was on a mission at ABBA to really start to go to these talks and figure out what I wanted to do as a behavioral scientist to change the world, and kind of what people were doing in the field currently to apply our science more globally. So one day when I was at going to talks, Dustin went and he was touring the city, and he was down on there's a pathway down by the river, and he was walking down the river, just checking out the sights. And while he was standing there, he overheard this interaction between a shoe shiner and a patron. And he just kind of stood there. He's heard it start. He thought it was a little weird. And so he just stood there and he listened. And he waited to see how it would end up, and kind of hoping that it would turn out to be kind of okay and he would just be able to move on. But here's his recollection of what happened. So this guy, who's in an expensive suit, walked up to this, kind of a businessman, walked up to the shoe shiner, and he stuck his foot out underneath his nose, like, shine my shoe. But he didn't say anything. It was just kind of a jerky, like, rant. And, this guy was decked out, slick back hair, nice suit, big watch, the works. Like, and the guy didn't really speak to him. The shoe shiner tried to strike up a conversation. The guy just kind of like one-word answers, kind of grunted at him and basically just like, shut up and shine my shoes. And when the guy was done shining his shoes, he said, "That'll be $5," and he held out his hand. And the patron proceeded to tell this guy that he wasn't going to pay him. He didn't have to. He didn't have any cash, and he just turned around and walked away. And the shoe shiner like stood up and was like, hey man, it's $5. And but the guy just kept walking. And so this is when Dustin knew like he had to do something. So he gets up, he runs over, he stops the guy, he pleads with him, and convinces him to pay him. The guy pulls a fat wallet out of his pocket, pulls out a 20, crumples it up, throws it in this guy's face and says, "There's your money, go get your drugs," or something like that. Just, oh, so horrible. So of course Dustin was horrified by this. So this blatant disregard for humanity was just disgusting. And so, he talked to the guy, and the guy was basically the shoe shiner. He was like, yeah, that's just how it is. They just accept it. Like, they accept being treated like trash on the street. Like, it's like that is acceptable behavior. We've made this okay. It's just a fact of life, and they're powerless to change it. But the reality though is that while there's probably nothing any person could do to definitively, absolutely 100% change that guy's behavior, by not doing anything, that is a like 100% guaranteed he's going to do that again. So when you're like rolling dice, I mean, 100% definitely still going to be a jerk in the future, or maybe, a 10% chance that you could change his behavior in the future. I mean, we've got to make a different choice. We've got to start doing something different, like Dustin did. He stood up and he did something different, something that most of us would not have had the courage to do. And he did it. So, we make excuses for people like this. We don't do something, we don't say something because we're scared. We feel like we have a weak position. We're not going to be able to convince them anyways. They're not going to change their behavior. Why try? That person's probably just having a bad day. He wouldn't really treat that person really like that on a normal day, really, right? But the answer is yeah, he probably does. He probably treats people like that all the time to varying degrees, right? But his girlfriend or wife probably doesn't get treated very well. She probably gets treated, like a second-class citizen sometimes. But she's probably scared to say something too. His coworkers, who knows? I don't know this guy. I'm just making up, maybes. But yeah, maybe he was just having a bad day. But the likelihood is maybe that's how he is, that's how he acts on a day-to-day basis. Because if something comes that second nature, like he didn't even have to try. He wasn't even trying to be rude. That was just like, he was just rude. Like he was behaving rudely. And it seemed to come very fluently. So my assumption is that that is something that he does on a regular basis because he has a lot of practice. So people don't do anything, they don't say anything because he's not going to change anyway. And probably when people have said something, he's berated them for voicing their opinion and ultimately ignored them. So that person, was punished for their behavior. So they're not going to speak up in the future anyway. So Dustin, he came to me and he told me the story and he was questioning himself, like whether he should have done it. Okay, well, that guy's probably not going to change his behavior anyway. And my answer was like, yeah, hell yeah, you should have done that. That was the best thing that you could have done in that situation. No question about it. Because by doing something, you have at least given a even 1% chance that the next time that guy goes to get his shoe shined, he will pay the guy. And he won't be rude. He'll think of you. He'll think like, oh, maybe it's just out of fear that somebody's watching him. But he'll think about it. Next time he does it, he will guaranteed absolutely, unless he has a memory problem, he is going to recall that situation next time. And so that's important that you did something. And it might have worked and it might not. But at least you tried. At least you tried to fight the other odds, which is like not doing something 100% guaranteed, still going to do that in the future. So we have to start somewhere. We have to stand up. We have to change our behavior in order to change the world. We have to do something. This is the heart, this is the core of the Actively Caring People for movement that was started by Scott Geller. And this is the mission of Destination Humanity. This is me, like what I'm doing right now. This is me seeing a problem in this world. And rather than continuing to sit idly by, I'm taking action, finally. Even though it's risky and even though it's going to be a lot of work, like I'm totally up for it. I'm so stoked to finally be doing this. I'm writing this book because I think it's going to be good for this world. I think I have an important story to share. I have an important perspective on this world to share. And I want all of you to know what it means to live a truly happy, healthy, and productive life. I want to teach you the tools that you need to create that reality for yourself. We can't sit by and keep hoping it's going to happen. You have to do something. You have to take action. And we're all deserving of this. We're all deserving of this in our lives, but it's not something that's going to be given to us. So it's up to us. It's up to us to lasso the world and finally learn how to make our worlds keep spinning because of us rather than in spite of us. Thank you all for joining me on this journey to life's ultimate destination, humanity. Have a wonderful night. I hope all of you had a wonderful day and did something good for this world in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. I love you all.